my mum was a teacher, and she used to do a lot of work with sort of remedial work for children. And so she always just would take the time, it doesn't matter which book it was, to bring books to life and to make them fun. And when there was alliteration and silly words, really like make those silly words really long. And so it kind of brought colour to language, is what was one of her most wonderful attributes. And I think that's why I love literacy so much in the early years, because I have so many fond memories. Well, for me, literacy in the early years is really about equity and agency and lifelong opportunities. And that starts so much in the early years. It's not about teaching children to read early, because when I was in adult literacy and numeracy education, I saw firsthand the social, economic, and emotional impact that it has for people who don't have strong foundational skills in oral language and literacy and maths. And really, you saw how it affected their ability, their confidence in general with being able to manage the world, but also their ability to have agency over their world. So if something was wrong, for example, with their pay slips, or being able to advocate for themselves or for their own children, you saw that they felt a little hamstrung, really, in being able to do that. So for me, that's why I feel so passionate about literacy and oral language and maths in the early years, is because we know that we can create such impact that is going to set a child on a trajectory for the rest of their life. And so for me, oral language richness is critical when you're thinking about the depth of the vocabulary for children, phonological awareness, which really, and their communication skills, which supports their self-regulation and their listening to others, and generally their confidence in communicating what their wants and needs and aspirations are, is just so important for their lifelong learning, let alone the fact that it helps obviously support them in that next transition into school. Yeah, and that's why, I mean, to me, I just find it really crucial, and why I think why I almost find every day with children is so important, because you can make such a difference, and it leads on to the next day, and we're in the right time to be able to capture children if they have got a difficulty, right? Or if they do need some additional support. If we don't do it in the early years where we have the ability and we have better ratios to support children as well, then that's really our key role. And it's such a lost opportunity if we don't identify and support children and really move to have that really intentional teaching practice that's going to support those foundational skills for them. The brain development of children is exponential in those early years. So when we can make those intentional practices and supports for children who need some early intervention, we know that that's going to have the biggest difference to as they move through into the later years. We don't want to, if we have to come back when they're older, it is definitely a lot more difficult for them to be able to work through some of those practices they may need, but we can make that really great difference in the early years. And that's how amazing is that? It's what makes it the most exciting years, I think, in an individual's journey, is we can shape their confidence in themselves. We can shape both their cognitive as well as their emotional confidence and knowledge. And so that's why, when we think about oral language, we need to bring in rich language when we're speaking with children. Rather than sort of transactional, functional. So it's not just about, oh, yes, I'm speaking to children. I speak to them all day. Have I got intentional quality of oral language with the children? So when I'm talking about what I'm just doing, I might just really sportscast what I'm seeing, what I'm feeling, what I'm touching. And so children are building up their vocabulary as they're listening to us, as we're doing serve and return. And playing with language. I think one of the things that I love most about the early years as well is that we have the opportunity to be really silly. How much fun is that? You get to make silly alliteration and play with words and stretch words, and that's the part that I find most fun, and the part that children find most fun. I mean, how much do you see them giggling over silly books and silly words? And we get to have that fun in early childhood almost more than any other time of our lives. So I think we've got to really grasp it. And, we don't always have to be so serious, but we need to be that intentional play is what makes quality ECE so important. So thinking about the way in which we can actually develop phonological awareness in the early years, it's around hearing whole words in a sentence, but also recognizing rhyme, which is why those sorts of, Cat in the Hat books are tremendous, because you're just hearing those rhymes and you're hearing them changing, often like the first letter or the last letter in the word. And those are tremendously good books for really building up those literacy skills, because they can hear the difference between cat and hat, and making sure that they can hear the difference between that, because we can't, then we know we've got maybe something we need to just explore with that child's hearing. But if they've got that, that's tremendous. Really counting out those syllables. Can they hear that this word has actually got 2 or 3 syllables? The old basic, basket, ball. Can they do that? Are they hearing that? It helps them to break down it helps them to understand that words can be broken down into small chunks. Identifying the beginnings of words. So Sam, Tanya, you can go wash your hands. And so making the sound that also goes with their letter is really powerful, because children will start, they start to see their name and they recognize some letters, but are we making sure they understand the sounds that's going with those letters? And those blends, like I was saying about chip, chip, chocolate, and so all of those, those blend sounds are really neat, because they're starting to hear that they've actually got 2 letters together can actually make a really different sound. So those things are really helpful, and just segmenting words as well. So I might, add to the fact that you've actually got those words can be broken down into individual sounds, and then we can change those sounds. We can change the T to a P. So we can go from cat to cap, and we can really hear that. And I think those things can be just a great way we can do with play. We're just sitting there, and I might just talk to them about, if I'm in a book or reading and it's got a cat, just spend a little bit of time just sort of breaking that down and just making those sounds. And then you move on, and you just keep coming back around to it. It doesn't need to be anything formal or that time-ish, and we just do this as we go along and we play. And that's the best part about it. The best way to learn is through play.